You know what I'm saying? You know, and firing real gunshots. Fuck the sound effects, nigga. You know what I'm saying? Having real niggas from the hoods shouting out henchmen niggas that, yo, you know what I'm saying? We got bulletproof love for y'all niggas when y'all come through. Real niggas, not no fake ass niggas. Real niggas. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I mean, you know, like I said, there's real TV, there's ears to the streets. We got bulletproof love that's coming at a motherfucker real like a motherfucker. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Just to like close it out.
Violator and Star Entertainment, Jimmy Henchman's company, are across the street from each other.
Jimmy Henchman always wanted to be Chris Lighty. Everybody knows that.
But a friend of yours, Lodi Mack.
Rest in peace, Lodi Mack. You know the story. Like, I mean,
I know the story.
It was street shit.
Yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, you know what? If I slap your kid, you're gonna go all out too. It's the streets.
The internet did not just get shaken today. It got body slammed like a WWE main event nobody saw coming because somehow 50 Cent is trending for all the wrong reasons and the energy feels different. Not the usual trolling, not the typical clapbacks, not the regular calculated chaos he usually controls like a puppet master. This time, the narrative feels like it slipped out of his hands for a second, and that is when things get dangerous. Because when someone known for controlling the room looks even slightly off balance, the internet zooms in like sharks smelling blood dot, and then out of nowhere, like a surprise villain entering the final act, Jimmy Henchman allegedly calls in and drops a statement that hits the timeline like a lightning strike. Not just a comment, not just a reaction, but a bombshell that people are already calling untouched information. And the second that word started spreading, everything changed. Because untouched does not sound like gossip, it sounds like something that was never supposed to be part of the conversation. Now suddenly the internet is not laughing, it is investigating. Because this is no longer just entertainment, this feels layered, messy, and possibly deeper than people expected. Fans are replaying clips, revisiting old narratives, and questioning timelines like they are preparing for a courtroom documentary. And the wildest part? Nobody even knows exactly what the full statement includes yet. Just the idea of it was enough to set everything off. Meanwhile, people are looking at 50 Cent differently for the first time in a long time. Not as the one controlling the narrative, but as someone reacting to it. And that shift alone is enough to make the situation feel unpredictable. Because when control changes hands, even slightly, the story becomes unstable. And unstable stories? They explode fast. Because now the question is not just what was said, it is why it was said and what it could mean for everything people thought they understood. And if this untouched information is real, then this is not just drama. This is a narrative-shifting moment that could flip everything upside down. And the scariest part is we might only be hearing the beginning of something much bigger that has not fully surfaced yet. Let's rewind this entire situation. Because what we are watching right now did not just appear out of nowhere like random chaos. It has history, tension, and layers that have been building quietly for years behind the scenes. The connection between 50 Cent and Jimmy Henchman has always carried a complicated energy. One that sits somewhere between industry politics, personal history, and unresolved narratives that never fully disappeared. It was never something the mainstream audience followed closely every day. But the tension was always there in the background, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And when moments like this happen, those older layers suddenly become relevant again. At first, this situation did not feel like anything out of the ordinary. Just another day in the cycle of hip-hop commentary and internet reactions that come and go quickly. People were focused on regular updates, trending topics, and the usual back and forth that defines online culture. But then the idea of a call coming in connected to Jimmy Henchman changed everything instantly. Because that is not something people hear every day, and it immediately raised questions about context, timing, and intention. And once those questions entered the conversation, they did not stay quiet, because timing in situations like this is never random, even if it appears that way on the surface. When a name like this re-enters the conversation at a specific moment, people assume there is a reason behind it. Some believe it could be connected to ongoing narratives that are not fully visible yet, while others think it might be a response to something happening behind the scenes. Either way, the timing itself becomes part of the story. And that is when things start to feel more serious than just casual discussion. Now, here is where the energy begins to shift from curiosity into tension. Because once the phrase untouched information enters the narrative, it changes how everything is viewed. That phrase carries weight because it suggests something that has not been publicly discussed or revealed before. And when people hear that, they immediately start imagining possibilities that go beyond what is actually known. Some assume it refers to details that were intentionally kept out of previous conversations, while others think it could involve entirely new information. And that uncertainty fuels the situation further. Meanwhile, 50 Cent is being watched more closely than usual, not just for what he says, but for how he reacts. Normally, he's the one setting the tone, controlling the narrative, and steering conversations in directions that benefit him. But this time, the attention feels different because people are analyzing his response rather than just reacting to his moves. And that subtle shift changes the entire dynamic. Because when the audience starts observing instead of following, the balance of control begins to change. At the same time, the internet begins doing what it does best, digging into everything, connected to the situation like it is building a case piece by piece. Old interviews are being revisited, past statements are being reanalyzed, and timelines are being compared in ways that were not happening before. TikTok becomes a space for breakdowns, Twitter turns into a debate zone, and Instagram comments fill with theories that range from logical to completely speculative. And once that level of attention begins, it does not slow down easily. It only grows because when people feel like there might be missing information, they naturally try to fill in the gaps themselves. That process creates new narratives, new interpretations, and new discussions that continue expanding the story. And even if those narratives are not fully accurate, they still become part of the conversation. That is how situations like this grow beyond their original scope. They take on a life of their own. Now let's focus again on Jimmy Henchman, because his presence in this situation adds a level of seriousness that cannot be ignored. This is not someone who casually appears in trending conversations without impact, and that alone changes how people interpret what is happening. The idea that he is connected to his statement being discussed publicly creates immediate tension. And that tension makes people pay closer attention to every detail, because when a name carries history, it brings context with it, even if that context is not fully explained in the moment. People begin connecting past events, past narratives, and past relationships to the current situation. And those connections create a more complex picture than what is visible on the surface. That complexity is what keeps people engaged, because it suggests there is more beneath what is being shown. Now, here is where things start building into something bigger. Because the conversation is no longer just about what was said, it is about what it could mean. The focus shifts from the statement itself to the possible implications behind it. And those implications vary depending on who is interpreting them. Some see it as a challenge to existing narratives, while others see it as a moment that could introduce new perspectives. Either way, the stakes feel higher than before, because once the idea of untouched information is introduced, it creates an expectation that something significant could be revealed. And when expectations reach that level, the next development becomes critical. People are no longer satisfied with hints or partial information, they want clarity and confirmation. And until that happens, the tension continues to rise. That is where the situation stands right now. At the same time, there is an underlying uncertainty that makes everything feel unpredictable. Nobody knows exactly what was said in full, nobody knows how it will be confirmed, and nobody knows how it will impact the overall narrative. That lack of certainty keeps people watching closely for any new detail that might emerge. And when attention is that focused, every small update becomes important. Now consider what happens if this information turns out to be exactly what people are expecting, or even more significant than anticipated. That would not just add to the story, it would change how everything connected to it is understood moving forward. It could confirm certain ideas, challenge others, and introduce entirely new questions that were not part of the conversation before. And once that happens, the narrative expands even further. On the other hand, if the information does not match the expectations that have been built around it, it creates a different kind of tension. People begin questioning why it was introduced in the way it was, and what the intention behind it might have been. That shift moves the focus away from content and toward perception. And perception can be just as powerful as any confirmed fact, because it shapes how people react. Right now, everything feels like it is building toward a moment where something more concrete will either confirm or challenge what has been suggested so far. The story has reached a point where curiosity alone is no longer enough for the audience. People want answers, they want details, and they want something that provides clarity. And when expectations reach that level, the next development becomes the most important moment, because it determines how everything that came before it is interpreted and understood. And if that meant delivers something unexpected, it could completely shift the direction of the story. That is why the tension feels so high right now, because the outcome is still unknown. And as the situation continues to evolve, one thing becomes increasingly clear. This is not just a passing conversation that will fade quickly. It has the elements of something that will continue developing over time. The combination of history, timing, and uncertainty creates a narrative that keeps growing. And that growth suggests that this is only the beginning of something larger. Because whatever comes next will not just add to what we already know, it will redefine how the entire situation is viewed. And until that next piece of information is revealed, the tension will continue building. The audience will keep watching, the discussions will keep expanding, and the story will keep evolving. And when that next moment arrives, it might completely flip everything all over again. And this is where everything stops feeling like controlled tension and turns into full-scale internet chaos that nobody can slow down even if they tried. The moment the phrase "Untouched Bombshell" started circulating alongside Jimmy Henchman, the timeline did not just react, it completely exploded into a digital war zone of opinions, theories, and emotional reactions. TikTok analysts clocked in like detectives on a high-profile case. Twitter threads stretched longer than movie scripts. And Instagram comments looked like courtroom debates with people arguing like they had personal stakes in the outcome. This was no longer casual entertainment. This was engagement at maximum intensity, because now the conversation has shifted from curiosity into confrontation. And that kind of shift changes everything instantly. Before, people were wondering what could be behind the statement, but now they are choosing sides like they already know the truth. One side believes 50 Cent is still 10 steps ahead, and this is just another calculated narrative play, while the other side feels like the control may have slipped slightly and something real might be surfacing. And when those two perspectives collide, the tension multiplies across every platform. The internet thrives on conflict, and right now it is feeding off this situation non-stop. Now let's bring the spotlight back to 50 Cent, because his position in all of this is being examined more closely than ever before. Usually, he is the one steering conversations, controlling the tone, and making sure every narrative works in his favor. But this time, people are watching his reactions instead of just reacting to his moves. That shift might seem small, but it changes the entire dynamic of the situation. Because when the audience starts analyzing instead of following, the balance of control begins to shift. And that is where unpredictability enters the picture. At the same time, Jimmy Henchman continues to dominate the conversation simply by being associated with what is being described as untouched information. His name alone carries weight, history, and context that makes people take the situation more seriously. This is not a random mention, and that is exactly why the reaction is so intense. Because when a name like that enters the narrative, people assume there is more beneath the surface than what is being said publicly. And that assumption fuels everything further. Now here is where things get even more chaotic, because the internet begins doing what it always does when faced with incomplete information. It starts creating its own versions of the story in real time. Some theories suggest that this untouched information could involve details that were never included in past narratives. Others believe it could be connected to events that people have speculated about for years but never confirmed. And then there are those who think this could be part of a larger strategic moment designed to control attention. Every theory adds another layer to the situation, because once multiple interpretations start circulating at the same time, the narrative becomes harder to define clearly. People begin comparing ideas, debating possibilities, and challenging each other's perspectives. And that creates a cycle where the story continues to grow even without new confirmed information. That is exactly what is happening here. The conversation is expanding faster than facts can keep up with it. Meanwhile, Contradictions begin appearing across different discussions and interpretations, which only adds to the confusion. Certain details do not align perfectly, certain assumptions feel incomplete, and certain reactions raise more questions than answers. And once contradictions enter the narrative, the internet focuses on them intensely. People start questioning everything again, even things they previously accepted without hesitation. That creates a loop of uncertainty that keeps repeating itself, because now nobody feels completely confident in what they believe, and that uncertainty spreads quickly across platforms. One moment someone feels sure about their perspective, and the next moment they are reconsidering everything based on a new idea or interpretation. That constant shift creates instability in how the situation is understood. And when instability takes over, the chaos reaches its peak. That is exactly where things are right now. Picture this entire situation like a reality show reunion that never ends, where every answer leads to more questions instead of resolution. The tension stays high, the reactions stay intense, and the audience stays engaged because there is always something new happening. But instead of being controlled, this is unfolding across the entire internet at once in real time. That makes it bigger, faster, and more unpredictable than anything scripted. And that unpredictability is what keeps people locked in. Now here's the part people are starting to realize, but not everyone is saying openly yet. This situation is not just about what is true or false, it is also about influence and attention. Every reaction, every post, and every discussion is generating engagement at a massive scale. Views are rising, conversations are expanding, and names are trending continuously. And in the digital world, that kind of attention has real value. Beyond just entertainment, because whoever controls the narrative controls how the story is remembered moving forward. And right now, that control is being contested by multiple sides at once. 50 Cent represents one version of control, while the introduction of untouched information suggests another version that has not been fully revealed yet. And the audience is stuck in the middle trying to decide which holds more weight. That struggle keeps the story active and evolving. Now consider what happens if this so-called untouched bombshell turns out to be exactly what people are expecting, or even more significant than anticipated. That would not just add to the story, it would completely redefine it. It could shift perceptions, confirm long-standing theories, and introduce new questions that were never part of the conversation before. And once that happens, the narrative expands even further. Because new information always creates new reactions. On the other hand, if the information does not meet the expectations that have been built around it, it creates a different kind of tension focused on credibility. People begin questioning why it was introduced in the first place and what the intention behind it might have been. That shift moves the focus away from the content itself and toward how it was presented. And perception can be just as powerful as any factual revelation, because it shapes how people respond moving forward. Right now, everything feels like it is building toward a moment where something more concrete will either confirm or challenge everything that has been suggested so far. The story has reached a point where curiosity alone is no longer enough to keep people satisfied. People want clarity, they want details, and they want something that provides a clear direction. And when expectations reach that level, the next development becomes critical, and here's the twist that makes this situation even more intense than it already is, because it does not feel like the peak yet. It feels like a setup for something bigger that has not been fully revealed. The tension is still rising, the narrative is still evolving, and the answers are still incomplete. That means there is still another level this situation can reach. And when it does, it might completely shift everything again. Because if one more piece of information surfaces, one more reaction changes the direction, or one more contradiction gets exposed, the entire narrative could flip instantly. That is how fragile the current understanding of this situation is right now. Everything feels like it is balanced on the edge of something larger. And once that edge is crossed, there is no going back, and the most unpredictable part is nobody knows exactly when that next moment will arrive or what it will reveal when it does. But based on how everything has unfolded so far, it will not be quiet or controlled when it happens. It will be loud, it will be chaotic, and it will demand attention from everyone watching. And when it finally hits, it will not just add to the story, it will redefine it completely. And that unpredictability creates pressure, even if it is not visible on the surface. Some people still believe he is fully in control and this is just another strategic moment playing out as planned. Others feel like something unexpected has entered the narrative and shifted the balance slightly. That divide creates tension that continues to grow over time. And in situations like this, perception matters just as much as facts. Now shift focus to Jimmy Henchman because his presence continues to carry weight that cannot be ignored. His name being tied to something described as untouched automatically raises the stakes of the entire situation. This is not just about what was said. It is about what could be behind it. And that possibility is what keeps people paying attention. Because when a name carries history, it brings context with it. And that context makes people connect past events, past narratives, and past tensions to what is happening now, even without full confirmation. Those connections create a more complex picture than what is visible on the surface. That complexity is what keeps the conversation alive and growing, because it suggests there is more beneath what is being shown publicly, and people want to uncover it. Now here's where the emotional fallout begins to take shape, because the situation is no longer just about information or speculation. It is about how people involved are being perceived and how those perceptions are changing over time. Reputations are being questioned, narratives are being challenged, and positions are being reevaluated. And once that process begins, it does not stop easily. It continues to evolve, because perception determines who receives support and who faces criticism. It does not always align with what is actually true. It is influenced by timing, delivery, and how information is presented rather than just the facts themselves. And once perception shifts, it becomes difficult to reverse. That is what makes this stage of the story so important, because it defines how everything will be remembered. Now consider the impact of what happens if this so-called untouched bombshell turns out to be exactly what people expect, or even more significant. That would not just add to the narrative, it would completely redefine it. It could confirm long-standing theories, introduce new perspectives, and change how people view everything connected to the situation. And once that happens, the conversation expands even further, because new information always creates new reactions. On the other hand, if the information does not match the expectations that have been built around it, it creates a different kind of fallout focused on credibility. People begin questioning why it was introduced in the way it was, and what the intention behind it might have been. That shift moves the focus away from the content itself and toward how it was presented. And that can be just as impactful as any revelation, because it shapes how people respond moving forward. Now zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this situation is not just about one statement or one reaction. It is about how narratives are created, controlled, and challenged in real time by public engagement. At the beginning, everything felt clear and easy to follow, but now it feels layered and uncertain. And when uncertainty takes over, perception becomes more powerful than facts. That is when stories begin to shift direction, because when people do not have full clarity, they rely on interpretation, and interpretation can vary widely depending on perspective. That creates multiple versions of the same story existing at the same time. And when that happens, the narrative becomes unstable. That instability is what keeps the conversation active, because people continue searching for clarity. Now here is the twist that changes everything and forces people to reconsider what they thought they understood. What if the truth does not fully match any of the narratives currently being discussed? What if each perspective only represents part of the story rather than the full picture? And what if the audience has been reacting to incomplete information from the beginning? That possibility shifts everything, because if that is the case, then the situation is not just about uncovering information. It is about understanding how stories are constructed and presented. It means that the loudest voices are not necessarily the most accurate ones. And it means that the real story might still be developing beneath everything that has been said so far. That realization creates a different kind of tension, one based on uncertainty rather than reaction. Now as the noise begins to settle slightly, something else starts to happen that signals a transition in the story. The reactions become less explosive, but the analysis becomes more detailed and focused. People are not just reacting emotionally anymore, they are thinking more critically about what this all means. That shift suggests that the story is entering a new phase. Not an ending, but a transformation, because stories like this do not end in one moment. They evolve over time as new information continues to surface. Right now, it feels like one chapter is closing while another is beginning quietly. In the background, there are still unanswered questions, still missing details, and still tension that has not been resolved. And that indicates that something more is coming. This is not the conclusion, and if there is one thing that has become clear through everything that has happened so far, it is that the most important moment has not happened yet. The loudest reactions may have passed, but the most significant development is still ahead. Because whatever comes next will not just add to the story. It will redefine it completely, and the final reality is this situation is far from over even if it feels like a major turning point has already been reached. There are still layers to uncover, still perspectives to understand, and still questions waiting for answers. That means the story continues whether people are ready or not. And when the next revelation arrives, it will not just continue the narrative. It will change everything again. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happens next, because the story is not over. And when the next twist drops, you already know where to be. Right here with Fame. Blue, where the drama hits harder and the truth always finds its way out.